The airshow crowd buzzed with excitement. Thousands of people packed along the edge of the runway, eyes turned skyward. Flags waved, kids screamed with joy, and the ground rumbled as jets roared overhead. But near the far edge of the crowd, past the last row of picnic blankets and soda cups, one woman didn't clap or cheer. She stood alone, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the sky like she was waiting for something only she understood. She didn't hold a phone. She didn't even blink as the announcer's voice boomed across the tarmac, counting down the minutes to the grand finale. 4 fighter jets streaked into view, first tight and precise, a crowd-pleasing warm-up. Then came the B-2 Spirit, the stealth bomber most had only seen in documentaries, its black triangle slicing silently across the sky. The formation was perfect, until it wasn't. The B-2 slowed, shifted, tilted slightly to the right. To most people watching, it looked like a dramatic flourish, something choreographed. But to those who knew aviation, it was a breach. Military jets don't break formation mid-pass. Not without cause. Not without command. Except no one gave that order. For a few seconds, everything froze. Radios crackled with static. Generals squinted into the sun. Then the B-2 eased back into line, smooth as if nothing had happened. The crowd roared oblivious, but 3 men on the ground knew better. The bomber hadn't veered for theatrics. It had dipped its wing. Toward her. She didn't smile. Didn't move. Just nodded once. Barely perceptible, like she had been acknowledged. Like she had been remembered. Claire Maddox didn't look like someone you'd notice in a crowd. Her navy shirt fit close, but plain sleeves pushed up. Her jeans were clean, but unremarkable. Her boots were worn, the kind you buy once and keep for years. She had no lanyard, no badge, no family tagging along. She was just standing there near the outer fence like it was the only place she belonged. Her hair was tied back in a tight bun, more out of habit than style. She didn't check her phone. She didn't speak. Her posture was balanced, relaxed, but unmistakably practiced. The kind of stance someone learns through repetition. Not military parade stiff, but coiled. A presence that made people glance twice and not know why. Some airmen nearby noticed her. Young, loud joking about engines and thrust ratios. One elbowed the other. She VIP. The other shrugged. Contractor, maybe. Or base family. Who cares? But one of them kept watching her. Noticed the way she stood. Noticed that she wasn't reacting to the flyovers. Not like a fan. Like a reader. Someone interpreting the sky, not marveling at it. That unsettled him. On the platform above, General David Rusk adjusted his sunglasses and scanned the crowd out of habit. That's what generals do at shows like this. Smile wave, make speeches. But his eyes locked on Claire for a second too long. Something about her scratched at an old memory, something he couldn't place. Not a face he knew. More like a shape, a posture, a feeling from a mission he wasn't supposed to remember. His aide rattled off timings and confirmations. The B-2 was inbound. Everything on schedule. Rusk nodded, distracted. That woman. She didn't fit. She wasn't dressed like a civilian, not really. She wasn't in uniform either. But she stood like someone who had been. Someone who didn't flinch under jet engines. Someone who knew exactly what the next maneuver should be and what it meant when it changed. She hadn't moved since she arrived. The crowd swelled and shifted around her. Kids spilled juice. Vendors yelled. But Claire remained motionless, like a statue, like she had done this before, many times, and maybe long ago from the other side of the runway. She was there not for the spectacle. She was waiting, watching, listening. The air over the Texas base shimmered with heat. It was the kind of morning where even the concrete felt sun-bleached. Vendors parked in neat lines along the perimeter, smoke rising from BBQ pits and food trucks. The smell of jet fuel mixed with kettle corn and grilled onions. Families gathered in clusters of folding chairs and blankets, most arriving before dawn to secure a good spot. Kids sat on shoulders waving plastic flags. Veterans wore polos stitched with faded squadron patches and carried the weight of old stories in their stances. Some leaned on canes. Others stood tall, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Their silence wasn't lack of enthusiasm. It was reverence. Near the stage, local officials mingled with high-ranking officers. 2 congressmen shook hands beside a retired general who had flown in for the tribute. A photographer snapped pictures as they posed in front of a line of vintage aircraft. A loudspeaker boomed over the tarmac. 15 minutes until the B-2 arrival. Phones came out. Selfies began. Everywhere the crowd pulsed with excitement, except for the far west sector. Near the outer fence, Claire still stood alone. Her face remained neutral, not cold, not dismissive, focused. She didn't need shade or water or a better view. She was exactly where she needed to be. Airmen milled about, laughing, trading specs about aircraft in the flyover. One pointed out the T-38 sweeping past. Another joked about tight barrel rolls and G-force. They noticed Claire again. Still not filming, still not clapping. One muttered something about aviation nuts. The others ignored him. In the tower, General Rusk watched all this from behind the tinted glass. The crowd, the jets, the woman. Something about her unsettled him. He turned to his aide and asked quietly, "Do we have passive ID scans running?" The aide nodded only in the restricted zones. Rusk tapped the glass. "Run a sweep on quadrant 4. Discreetly. I want to know who she is." The aide blinked. "You think she's a threat?" Rusk didn't answer. His focus was back on Claire. She hadn't moved an inch. Orders moved fast in places like this. Within seconds, cameras focused on quadrant 4. Passive scans picked up body heat posture markers and gait analysis. Facial recognition began to compare frames to every file since 2005. Military, civilian, discharged, deceased. A technician frowned, then frowned harder. The system had pinged something strange. Not an active personnel file. Not someone flagged. A name. A match. From the past. Claire Maddox. Captain. Pilot. Stealth qualified. Listed KIA Guam training accident 2011. The tech flagged the result and called his supervisor. Within minutes, the information reached General Rusk. He stood still, listening. His face didn't change, but his knuckles turned white around the edge of the console. He whispered her name, not in recognition, in disbelief. He remembered that mission. Black level. Eyes only. No debrief. No remains recovered. The file had disappeared from the database 3 months after her reported death. Not a glitch. A wipe. The aide leaned in. "Sir, do you want her detained?" Rusk shook his head. "Not yet. Watch her. Do not engage. This is bigger than us." The aide hesitated, then nodded. Cameras zoomed tighter. The crowd continued cheering for the jets above, oblivious. But near the fence, Claire finally moved. Just slightly. A shift in weight. A subtle hand to her jacket. Inside, a black patch rested against the lining. No name, no unit. Just a shape, a wing, a memory. And somewhere deep in the system, a lock began to loosen. The name flashed again across the secure feed. Claire Maddox. It didn't make sense. The file was archived as restricted, sealed under Tier 5 authority, the kind of classification used when something wasn't supposed to exist anymore. General Rusk read the summary. Deceased. Cause classified training mishap. Recovery status none. Burial symbolic. Folded flag. Empty casket. All wrapped in silence. But here she was. Alive. Real. Standing 10 feet from the flight line without credentials, without clearance, without hesitation. He whispered to no one in particular. "She's not supposed to be here." The aide replied, "Sir, what if this is a misread?" Rusk's voice was low. "The systems don't make mistakes like this, not with this kind of data." Down in the control center, technicians ran her scan again. No errors. Biometrics, gait, retinal match. Voice profile confirmed from a decades-old recording. It was her. One of the younger officers in the room stared at the screen. "That's not possible," he said. The older officer beside him didn't respond. He just leaned forward and whispered, "I flew with her once." Then she vanished. Rusk turned away from the window. His mind raced through what this meant. If she was alive, then someone had buried her on purpose. If she had come back, it wasn't for revenge. It was for something much more dangerous. Truth. The B-2 was still inbound. The crowd was still unaware. But somewhere above them, protocols were being overwritten. Because Claire Maddox had just re-entered the system. Claire had flown missions no one would admit happened. Covert routes over territories that didn't exist on maps. She had been recruited straight out of flight school. Not for her charm. For her focus. Her silence. Her precision. The last mission changed everything. A recon unit had gone dark near the Korean border. Weather was brutal. Intel scrambled. A rescue would have violated 5 treaties. So they sent no one. Claire refused to let them die. She broke protocol, launched the B-2 without clearance, slid through radar shadows and smoke, landed under enemy fire, lifted 2 wounded soldiers into the aircraft with her own arms, then vanished. The mission succeeded. The B-2 returned undamaged. The crew survived. But it was never logged. No press. No medals. Just silence. Afterward, they didn't court-martial her. They didn't have to. They erased her, deleted her access, removed her from records, told her to disappear. She obeyed. Sort of. She didn't fight it. But she didn't forget. She lived quiet, off-grid, changed names, worked behind scenes where she could. She still flew, sometimes on private test flights, sometimes at night over airspace no one monitored. The kind of flying that wasn't about visibility. It was about staying alive. She had been watching from afar as the world changed, watching as her legacy was boxed, locked, buried. Until today. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about memory, about honoring what had been stolen, because Claire hadn't come back to demand anything. She came back to show them she was never gone. The sound came before the sight, a low, distant hum that vibrated through the chest and the soles of the feet. Children jumped. Veterans turned their heads with practiced calm. The announcer's voice grew louder, bracing the crowd for the signature flyover. 4 F-22 Raptors appeared, first slicing through the sky in perfect synchronicity. Cameras went up, cheers followed, and then almost silently, the B-2 emerged, its wings wide, its shadow stretching across the tarmac like a memory. It flew straight steady until it didn't. The tilt was small, subtle, barely visible to most, but to pilots, to technicians, to anyone who had studied this aircraft inside and out, the shift was obvious. The B-2 slowed just enough to separate. It tilted, angled toward the west fence, toward Claire. From the ground it looked like flare, a bonus maneuver, something showy. But it wasn't. No bomber breaks formation like that. Not in a military flyover, not without orders. General Rusk leaned forward. His aides stared at the screen. What is he doing? The answer came quietly. He's not flying the demo. He's saluting. The crowd cheered, unaware. Kids clapped. The announcer praised the smooth transition as if it were part of the plan. But it wasn't. It was personal. It was silent. It was meant for one person. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't raise her hand. She just nodded once. A gesture so small only the pilot might have seen it. But it was enough. For that brief moment, something older than command passed between them. Recognition, not of rank, not of rules, but of history, of truth. Claire turned away from the crowd. No one stopped her. No one even noticed. She slipped behind a food vendor's truck, crossed through a side gate, and walked with quiet purpose toward an auxiliary hangar most people didn't remember. The lock on the side panel hadn't been used in years. But her hand moved to the edge of her jacket. Inside, tucked behind a stitched seam, was a small card. Worn, faded, but still magnetic. She tapped the panel. The lock blinked green. Inside, the air was thick with heat and silence. 2 techs argued near the nose of a grounded F-35, unaware of her presence. She passed them without a word. Her boots made no sound. At the back of the hangar behind a shelf of forgotten equipment, a rusted panel covered a small elevator. She found the latch, flipped it. Inside, a fingerprint scanner waited beneath dust. She pressed her hand. The light blinked. The elevator moved. It took her to a place few remembered, a level beneath the base. Not on any current map, not in any tour. It was where things went to be forgotten. The door opened with a groan. Claire stepped into the archive. Paper files, leather bindings, operations so buried they were never digitized. She scanned the shelves. Past missions labeled with names that meant nothing to anyone anymore. Except her. She found it. A file marked Blackbird Shadow. No barcode, no index, just 2 initials. She opened it. Flight logs, satellite maps, notes written in shorthand only she understood. And at the bottom a single line. Command override authorized. Call sign Maddox. Access B2. She smiled. Just slightly. It wasn't pride. It was confirmation. Back above ground, the airbase monitors flickered, one by one, in break rooms, in towers, in control centers. An old video began playing. Claire's face appeared. Younger. Determined. Speaking into a secure transmitter. Her voice echoed across the base. Mission confirmed. Extraction complete. Returning home. It wasn't just footage. It was proof. And in that moment, everyone watching understood. She hadn't returned to be seen. She had returned to be remembered. The ground trembled. Heads turned. Something was wrong. The announcer's voice cracked slightly as he tried to keep the crowd calm. The B-2 was not climbing into its usual arc. It was slowing, descending. Control scrambled. Radios lit up with overlapping commands. Sir Spirit 1 is dropping altitude. That's not scheduled. Who cleared that no one had? And no one was stopping it. Claire moved forward. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just certain. She crossed the open tarmac with slow, even steps. No escort. No clearance badge. Just her. The security line parted before her. No one dared block the path. Some didn't even see her. Others couldn't look away. The B-2's wheels extended, gears unfolding like the wings of a giant bird long thought extinct. It descended with unnatural grace. No turbulence. No drift. The landing was precise, deliberate, final. General Rusk watched from the tower, his voice low. She's doing it. No one answered. Because they knew. The aircraft wasn't responding to current commands. It was responding to something buried, something that only she could access. Claire approached as the hatch hissed open. No one stepped out. No one shouted. The machine waited. She paused at the ramp, looked up, then boarded. Inside, the cockpit lights flickered. The console glowed. Her hand reached for the controls. Everything lit up. No resistance. No block. It was hers. Outside, the crowd had gone silent. Phones dropped. Hands lowered. Everyone felt it. They weren't watching a performance. They were witnessing something return from the grave. Across the tarmac, a man broke formation. Colonel Grant Nash stepped through the crowd, ignoring the calls from his earpiece. His dress uniform was crisp, his boots loud against the concrete. But his face was calm. He stopped in front of the aircraft, looked up at the open hatch, then turned toward Claire. She stepped into view. No helmet, no insignia, just her face, weathered, real. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He saluted. Not a polite gesture, not a nod. A full, sharp salute, like to a superior, like to someone whose legend he had only heard, in whispers. Others followed. First a young officer in the second row, then an old veteran near the fence. One by one caps came off. Backs straightened. Hands rose to brows. Claire didn't return the salute at first. She just stood there, letting it happen, letting the weight of it settle. Then she nodded. Once. Clean. Steady. And that was enough. No words were needed. No broadcast. No fanfare. Just silence. And respect. Claire didn't stay in the spotlight. After the landing, after the salutes, she stepped back into the shadows. No interviews, no press release, no statement. She returned to a quiet life near the edge of an old airbase where the fences rattled in the wind and the paint peeled from buildings forgotten by time. Every morning at 5 a.m., she ran the perimeter. Same route, same pace, the way she had when she first trained here as a young pilot. On Sundays, she placed flowers at a memorial with no names, just dates. Dates of missions never spoken, losses never recorded. The B-2 she had flown was stored at Hangar 9, covered, locked. But the airman on base said the lights near its fuselage sometimes blinked when she passed by. No one explained it. No one tried. Word spread without being official. Her name, once erased, now whispered with reverence. New cadets heard stories about a woman who flew through silence, about a ghost who came home and made a machine remember her. She never wore the uniform again, not because she had lost it, because she had outgrown it. When she passed, there was no broadcast, no funeral aired on television. But on that day, every B-2 in the fleet flew in formation. Except one. That one peeled off quietly, dipped its wing, then disappeared into the sun. And everyone watching knew what it meant. Claire Maddox had never needed medals. She had needed space to serve. And finally, she had been seen.